I celebrate New Year personally with the spring equinox in March. And I've talked a lot about how we are now in deep hibernation, yet we try and fight and push against that to do the most out there time of the year. And I honestly feel that is where so much exhaustion, anxiety, kind of mental health things come around this time of year, because we're pushing against everything that's natural to us, everything that's natural to us. And so it's so powerful when you do get to a place, and this comes from everything we've talked about so far today, will help people to get to know themselves. So rather than feeling like I should go to the 74 Christmas parties, I'm an awful person if I don't, I'm boring. You mentioned about not living, but to me, living, I love nothing more than sitting in on my own with my Christmas tree with all the lights on at night. That to me, that's living. That's joy of Christmas. But again, it's taken me a long time to get there, of not feeling like I'm like the boring odd one out. So if you want to party, brilliant, like you do you. But I think at this time of year, it's so important for us to first of all do us, to communicate that. Because I think that's very felt, as you said, if we're making up the excuses of why we don't want to go, people know when there's an undertone of not being honest. Yeah. No. Whereas I think when we can just say, I don't fancy it. I love you, but I want to sit at home with my Christmas tree.
It's maybe a good thing if you've never considered what side of the coin you lie on. You know, so, I've met people, like I was interviewing Jedediah Jenkins, the writer, and he said he's a extrovert. Like, he needs to be around tons of people. He loves being out. He feeds off the energy. It creates more energy for him. And I find that so hard to understand, because I've never experienced that in my life ever. I like being around people, more so one-on-one, because I like having really juicy conversations. But if I'm in a big group, you know, when I was younger, I think I kind of drank, not always excessively, but I drank to kind of feel some sort of contentment within that environment, because it's such a bombardment of energy for me. And people, I think, have a cliched view of what extrovert, introvert means. An introvert is someone who's shy and quiet and meek and doesn't want to do anything. An extrovert is loud and brash. And it's so not the case. You can get the calmest, most quiet, considered, happy and silent extroverts who just love being around people, and you can get relatively loud, probably like me, introverts who love to communicate and talk but need to have some sort of retreat at the end of the day or week, whatever it is, to recalibrate. And it's just interesting, I guess, to notice that of yourself, so then you can make better decisions, so you don't get overwhelmed and feel awful.
Absolutely.
So important. It's so important. So what else would you advise this time of year? We're feeling perhaps overwhelmed. Maybe we're feeling a bit down. Maybe we should we should definitely bring loneliness into the equation, because there are, unfortunately, over the last 2 years especially, we have had an epidemic of loneliness. So many people out there are feeling more shut off than ever. They may have been through some seriously tough situations. People that I've been speaking to over the last 2 years through my work, who have completely lost their industry or lost their private business, or if they're self-employed, have had a really tough time depending on the line of work. Obviously, people that have just felt very alone because they haven't had much contact with other humans. What else can we do for ourselves to help ourselves, I guess, feel connection?
Exactly. I think one of the first things is, as you've spoken about, that honest awareness in yourself, because we can't allow people to help us unless we know what we need that help with, unless we know what we need that support with. And I know I've been very, very guilty over the years of being that person who's always okay, to the point where everyone thought I was always okay in the moments when I really wasn't, but no one knew I wasn't, because I didn't really know that I wasn't. And so I think it really helps first and foremost to know that and own it, and then to speak about it with people and to let people know if that is how you're feeling. And because again, I feel like people can get so caught up in their own thing at this time of year that they don't necessarily realize you perhaps need that little bit of time with them, or you need support in this way, or a little phone call here and there wouldn't go amiss. And so I feel like communication is really big around this time of year. I think as well, take off any big expectations, because when we boil down to it, it's one day. We have a month of build up, don't get me wrong, but it is just one day. So I think, again, if we can take off the expectation and the pressure, as we've spoken about a lot so far, having to be anything other than what it is. Trying to find then, first of all, a lot of self-care. So really feeling into what is it that I need right now. And things like, if we're going to talk about those moments of overwhelm, where you're in those moments when you feel really snowed under, first of all, coming into the body is really important. So we live so in our mind, and our mind's job is to try to problem solve and run here and there and find a million different ways around things. If we can drop out of the mind into the body, and even in those moments of loneliness, when we can learn to be with ourselves. And when I traveled one of the first times ever in India, like many years ago, I used to put my own cheek against my own shoulder. So I had skin on skin. And I'd say to myself, like, it's okay, you're here, I've got you, you're going to be okay. So I think, again, we often look to the outside world and outside people to give us what we need, when 9 times out of 10 we do have everything. I'm not saying we don't need other human contact, but we can learn to self-soothe, we can learn to self-care, we can learn to be there and hold ourselves. So in those moments of feeling loneliness, first of all, being there for yourself, holding your own hand, saying to yourself, it's okay, I've got you, I'm here for you, what is it that you need right now? In the same way I would do with you if you were struggling, like, what can I do for you right now? What would
We're
help?
awful at doing that to ourselves, aren't we? We're much more likely to reach out to someone we see struggling and say, I want to help, what can I do for you? And we're terrible at just giving ourselves even the time to work out, what do I need? You know, I often will find myself deep down, without realizing it, needing rest, but doing the absolute opposite, thinking, no, if I just do a few more things off my list, then I'll feel better. And that brings me on to asking you, I'd love to unpick a little more the notion of self-care, because again, it's something that gets bounded around a lot, and we hear it used in all manner of ways, and sometimes it might be, you know, it's been commodified, whatever, commercialized, but the true meaning of self-care can quite literally be, I'm imagining, anything that's not destructive to you as a person. Is there a better way of defining it, or maybe finding out what's right for you when it comes to self-care?
I think it's exactly about finding out what's right for you, because we all need care in different ways. We all need, depending on whether, if we go back to our earlier example, if you're an introvert, an extrovert, an ambivert, somewhere in between, we're all going to need then to take care of our energy in different ways. We're all going to need to take care of our emotions in different ways. And the more you get to know yourself, the easier and easier that gets. So I'm very like you. We're so similar. I need rest. So I know when I get overly emotional, the first thing I'm going to check in with is, have I had enough sleep? Have I been to bed early enough? Because if I haven't, I cannot emotionally regulate when I'm tired. I can't. So my thing then would be, and it's almost, again, the terms get talked about a lot, but it's reparenting yourself. Because when you've got no one to tell you to go to bed at 10 p.m, it feels sometimes a bit rebellious to still be up at like 11:30. And I have to then parent myself and say to myself, like, come on now, Kirsty, come on. It's time to get into bed, get a hot water bottle, like snuggle in, read a bit of your book. I have to kind of almost care for myself, and that to me is the ultimate act of self-care. Yes, there's bubble baths and there's massages and all the things I love doing, but ultimately knowing and giving myself what I need. It might be a good cry. Yesterday, don't know why, I sobbed like something terrible had happened. I just needed it in that moment. I needed to not keep telling myself, well, there's nothing wrong with you, things are going well, why do you feel like you're upset, why do you feel like you're going to cry? I did it all morning until the point where I was like, do you know what, off you go.
I can cry.
I felt so good for it after I'd done it, because I was like, that's just what and I didn't need to add a story to it. I didn't need a reason behind it. I just, in that moment, that's self-care.
Yeah, well, there's a physical release element to that, like laughing or like boxing or whatever it is that's got some sort of physical release to it. You know, you just have to, I guess, trial and error, find out what yours is, and there might be more than one way. I certainly, you know, laughter I definitely find can switch the energy for me entirely. If I watch like a stupid video on YouTube that's funny or whatever, it makes me feel a billion times better, and like I'm all of a sudden my day's been switched up. Like I think finding a really physical release is such a good way, because often I think we get so cognitive about things like, what is the best route out of this problem? Should I do this? Here's the pro list, the cons list, blah, blah. But sometimes you just need to, you know, physically feel a bit better and switch the energy up rather than working out like the cognitive route of things, because that is endless as well.